Hello again, you amazing human beings, you. Welcome back. You probably know that George Fox University was founded by the Society of Friends, the Quakers. But did you know that Quakers are one of the 3 traditional peace churches? Quakers, along with Brethren and Mennonites, form this group known as the Peace Churches because we believe that nonviolence is the pathway to justice and peace in the world, that you can't create peace through violent means. And this is grounded in Scripture and specifically in Jesus' words when he calls us to pray for our enemies and do good to those who harm us and show mercy. And in this Beatitude, he says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." Here's how the Message puts it. You're blessed when you can show people how to cooperate instead of compete or fight. That's when you discover who you really are and your place in God's family. So Jesus is telling us that cooperation is a source of blessing because cooperation is a way of showing tangibly that we're all children of God after all. We're all in the same family. Welsh composer Carl Jenkins is also interested in writing music about peacemaking. His work called The Peacemakers is a multi-movement work that expresses this desire of his for there to be peace in the world. And he wrote it out of a sense of disappointment because 12 years earlier he had written a piece called The Armed Man, a Mass for Peace. And he felt like since he'd written that first piece, not a lot had changed in the world around violence and conflict. So he wanted to express this again. It is a multi-movement work, which means that it has different smaller pieces that make up the whole thing. Think about it like chapters in a book. And there are actually 17 movements to this piece, and you're not going to listen to all of them. You're just going to listen to movement 4. Although, you can listen to all of them if you want to. That would be just fine. The texts for this work come from words of Martin Luther King Jr. They come from the words of Mahatma Gandhi, from the Dalai Lama, from the Quran, from the Bible, from St. Francis of Assisi, and many more voices who are speaking out for peace around the world. Each movement features different instruments from the culture that that movement is representing and the lyrics that that movement is representing. So movement 4 specifically is based on a poem by Mahatma Gandhi called "I Offer You Peace." And let's talk about what's happening musically, and then in a second we'll talk about the actual words and what they're communicating through the meaning of the text. So the timbre, here we have a full traditional Western orchestra that has stringed instruments and woodwind and brass. We also have a full vocal chorus that sings the lyrics to this piece. And then they're joined by 2 instruments from India, the tabla, which is a type of hand drum, and the bansuri, which is a flute. Both of these instruments are used in what we call in the West classical Indian music. And so Jenkins is borrowing them here to allude to the culture from which the text is coming. What about the harmony? The harmony is pretty straightforward. We've got slow rocking chords. In terms of rhythm, we've got a slow, steady pulse throughout, which kind of creates this meditative space. And then we have repetitive rhythms that are played with the orchestra. And again, this leaves space and kind of creates a sense of meditation. The melody is very singable. It's fairly straightforward, has a fairly narrow range. But what you want to notice about the melody is that though he has a whole chorus of voices to work with, Jenkins decides to have the chorus sing in unison a lot of the time. So to sing in unison means that the performers are actually singing the same note. Typically you might have the sopranos, the highest female vocal part, singing the melody, and then you could have parts, we call it, or harmony in the other voices. It's actually harder to make unison singing sound good. And so I wonder if this was an intentional text painting choice by Jenkins to have everyone singing in unison for a while to create literally a sense of unity in the piece, because it's about making peace in the world. So singing well in unison is actually harder than singing in parts. And it's kind of like peace. We think peace should be easy, but it actually takes a great deal of effort. So now we'll talk about the text for a second while we discuss the form, because the form of this piece is what we call A, B, A. And what that means is the A is a whole section. We have a section of text. The B is a separate section of text. And then we have another A, the last section of text. Here are the words of the poem by Gandhi. I offer you love. I offer you friendship. I see your beauty. I hear your need. I feel your feelings. My wisdom flows from the highest source. I salute that source in you. Let us work together for unity and love. Then he repeats the whole thing again, except for that last line. Let us work together for unity and love. And instead, Jenkins chooses to end the lyric at, I salute that source in you, which is an acknowledgement of the goodness and the potential in other human beings. And to me, that has resonance with our scripture that says, children of God, that we're all children of God, and that peacemakers are the people who recognize that everyone is a child of God. And lastly, I'll mention the texture. It's mostly homophonic. Once again, we have a foreground vocal part and background orchestra. The flute supports the vocal line and adds a unique color to the voices. And then the tabla kind of plays lightly throughout, but then at Let Us Work Together, it builds and is featured more prominently. So listen for those subtle changes in how the different instruments are related to each other and to the voice. And then finally here, I'll leave you once again with a few queries or questions for you to consider. First, how do you work for peace in your own life? Do you resolve conflict in healthy ways that respects the individuals involved? Do you resolve it at all, or do you try and avoid it? That's something worth thinking about and worth growing in. And the second thing is, peace is really linked with the virtue of justice, because without justice, some sense of equity or fairness, it's really hard to have peace. So my other question is, how do you cultivate the character of justice in your everyday life? What could you be doing to cultivate justice in your world? All right, that's it for now, you fabulous human beings. See you next time.